Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallama ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'ina lahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin. Wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. To proceed, alhamdulillah, continuing in Sulam at-Tawfiq of Al-Habib Abdullah bin Hussein bin Tahir in the sections, rahimahullah, in the sections of purity. We covered the invalidators of wudu in the last lesson. And we covered that they are four. And we gave you two things to review as homework. The first of them being those that are unmarriageable. And that is a question that stems from the discussion of invalidators of wudu from the point of view that someone who is marriageable, which we in Arabic, that is ajnabi, and that is ghayru al-mahram, right? That's someone who is not a mahram, not unmarriageable. And mahram by Sheikh Nuh Keller is translated as unmarriageable kin. Those that are unmarriageable due to being family. So if we're talking about wudu, then we talk about someone who is ajnabi or marriageable versus someone who is mahram, unmarriageable, breaks your wudu. So then that brings the question, who is unmarriageable then? And by exclusion, everyone else is marriageable and would break wudu. So that's how they introduce it. This is the first place they introduce it. They're going to talk about it again in other sections, but typically the fuqaha, they'll reference something the first time in a given chapter. Then after that, they'll just depend on you understanding it based on that initial treatment. So here we need to know who is mahram. And there are other rulings that this applies to. So for example, it's permissible for those people to be alone. It's permissible for those people for, like other than medical treatment and exceptions to touch one another, like shake hands or hug one another or something like that. And also having a mahram, having someone who's unmarriageable in certain circumstances is required in traveling for a woman. For example, for her to be obliged to make hajj, she has to have a mahram or a husband or a group of trustworthy women. To travel outside of her city, she should have the same. And without that, it is impermissible. So it's a ruling we need to know. So from your homework, who are those mahrams? And breaking them down into those three areas. Who can answer that from the males or ladies of the class? And then we also asked for the verse that proves the mahrams due to being family relations. Do we have anyone who's able to answer that? Bismillah. Walaikum salam. Yep, go ahead. Go ahead, from the back. Yeah.
So for 7 from kinship would be mothers, daughters, sisters, paternal aunts, daughters of his brothers, daughters of his sisters, and then the same 7 will be consecutive.
Okay.
There are 4 types of in-laws, which would be the spouse's parent, the spouse's child, the child's spouse, and the parent's spouse.
Allahu Akbar. And where, and what was the verse?
I forgot.
Anyone have the verse? The verse that teaches us the maharim for marriage. What is the verse? How does the verse go?
I have Surah Nur, verse 31. It says, and tell the believing women to lower their gaze and guard their chastity.
That's not the correct verse.
Oh.
No. So what number do you have? Aywa. All right, 423, which goes how? You could start with the Arabic and then we could do the translation. Yep.
حرمت عليكم أمهاتكم وبناتكم وأخواتكم وعماتكم وخالاتكم وبنات الأخ وبنات الأخت وأمهاتكم.
So just there, those seven. So these seven prohibited types of women, and this is speaking in the context of men, and the opposite with respect to for a woman, the opposites are her mahram, right? So these are seven that are forbidden due to kinship, right? These are those that are forbidden due to nasab, right? You have three types of so mahram is man hurima nikahuha ala al-abad min ajli nasab aw radha aw musahara. So a mahram, with if we speak in the context of a man, is a woman that he is forever prohibited to marry due to kinship. These seven are the ones that are for kinship. Or radha, and that means wet nursing. Or musahara, which means in-lawship, basically. So these seven are the ones that are forbidden for kinship. And that verse in Surah Nur, some of the mahrams are mentioned and some aren't, and it mentions other things that aren't necessarily relevant to the question. So that is not the verse that establishes the mahram. It's this verse of Surah An-Nisa. This verse, what is it, 23? 423 establishes the mahram of nasab due to kinship, right? Meaning blood relations. And then the Prophet ﷺ taught us in the hadith is in Muslim that those who are forbidden due to wet nursing are the same as those that are forbidden due to kinship, right? So the same seven. So if we were to look at this, that is parents by wet nursing, children by wet nursing, siblings by wet nursing, paternal aunts by wet nursing, maternal aunts by wet nursing, nieces and nephews by wet nursing, the child of the brother and the child of the sister, right? Or you could say the child of the brother and child of the sister is more accurate. Those same seven are forbidden by wet nursing, that are forbidden by kinship. And then that leaves us four that are forbidden due to being in-laws. So that stretches the list of maharim out to 18. 7 by kinship, the same 7 by wet nursing, and then 4 by in-laws. And the sisters answered that correctly. And then alhamdulillah, from Sidi Mustafa, we've added this verse. For those that like to memorize in Quran, it's just really, really easy to remember the list from the verse. حرمت عليكم أمهاتكم وبناتكم وأخواتكم وعماتكم وخالاتكم وبنات الأخ وبنات الأخت. Right. Allah mentions it very succinctly. And then it's those groups and on up, right? So like mothers means mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and so on. Daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters, and on down like that. So those are mahrams. And a mahram is, and its textual definition, though something that is a limited list is more accurately defined by just listing it. It's pretty easy to list 18 people, but the textual definition, you could say, is those who are forever forbidden to marry due to kinship, wet nursing, or in-lawship, if that is a word. In Arabic, it is a word, musahara. Right, Yosef. So that is correct. So we know the mahrams. So everyone else will break shuludu. And there's a subtlety here. Can anyone, a man is prohibited, if a man has a wife and she has a sister, he's not allowed to marry her. He's not allowed to marry her, but she breaks his wudu. Can anyone answer why?
He can marry her if his wife passes away.
Okay, what about, yep, yeah, let's say that, so we're not cryptic. So she's mahram because of jama. She's muharram because of jama. There are some women that in a given circumstance, a man is prohibited to marry them because he can't bring those two women together in marriage at the same time, like sisters. So he's married to his wife. He is not allowed presently to marry her sister. However, as Abdullah pointed out, as it happened, and that's what we call Sayyidina Uthman, Dhu and Nurayn, he married two daughters of the Prophet ﷺ, however, not simultaneously, consecutively, right? So if one was widowed, he could marry the sister after that. So that is a prohibition for jama. Also, like a woman's aunt, you couldn't be married to a woman and her khala, because that's prohibited from combination, but consecutive, it's not prohibited. So technically, she's not a mahram, but she is prohibited to marry, right? So she's excluded from this definition of mahram. And meaning she is not mahram from the point of view of evolution and other rulings related to that. However, she's muharram alayhi al-jama' bainaha wa bain ukhtiha. It's prohibited for him to combine her and her sister in wedlock at the same time. And alhamdulillah, that is from the mahasin of the sharia and mura'a of silat rahim and things like that. So that is the first of the two questions. The second of the two questions that we asked was the conditions for wudu not being broken for the one who sleeps sitting. How many conditions are there from those that have taken this class before? Yes.
There are 4.
There are 4. That is correct. What are those 4?
One is if your buttock stays firm in the same place while you're sitting down and sleeping.
Correct.
And if you're sitting down, you possess the right amount of consciousness to hear what's going on around you, even if you're dozing.
Not correct.
Oh.
So what's the next? That's one condition. What's the next condition? Dozing doesn't break wudu whether you're laying down or sitting up. Yeah.
Were you asking if you lose wudu while you're sleeping?
Conditions for not losing wudu while you sleep. First is that that you're firmly seated on what you're sitting on. So that leaves us 3 questions. 3 conditions, excuse me, 3 conditions. From the back, yes. Correct. So if I fell asleep sitting cross-legged like this, I can't wake up and I'm on my side. Right? Yep. Or I can't wake up. I fell asleep like this and I can't wake up like this. Because that means what? It means I'm moving around. Right? I'm not firm seated. Yep.
You are moderate build, if you're like too
Yep.
extremely frail and you're overly obese.
Yeah. You have to be of moderate build because those that are really large or really skinny, there's not pressure on that area that would prevent anything from breaking their wudu while they're asleep. And what's the last one? Correct. That and that's mahal khilaf actually that we never emphasize, but as we get into bigger books, we'll bring in some of this khilaf. So the 4th condition is that someone that is adal. Adal is someone who's upright, right? That can testify, their testimony is accepted. That someone who's upright not inform you that you lost ablution. That's mahal khilaf. Some of them said that someone ma'asum doesn't inform you. And that is la yutasawwar illa min nabi, right? So that's mahal khilaf. There's not a lot based on that khilaf, so we never really mention it that much, but that's actually mahal khilaf. That's correct. Those conditions, those 4 conditions are correct. That and yanam mumakkinan maq'adahu, that they sleep firmly seated, that they awaken in the same position in which they fell asleep, that they are of moderate build, and that they not be informed by someone upright that they lost ablution. With those conditions, you could sleep as deeply as you ever do, dream, everything, as long as you wake up in the same position. So, like someone who, for example, is on a long flight, seated in their airplane seat, doze off, fall asleep when they take off, and don't land until the plane hits the ground, right? Like they're just totally knocked out. In the Shafi'i school, that's no problem, and that's mahal khilaf between the fuqaha, right? So you might hear, and that's one of the reasons why we might emphasize this is the Shafi'i position, because otherwise all of those positions get jumbled up. You might hear someone say, if you drop something that's in your hand, that breaks your wudu. That is the ijtihad of another imam, right? The Imam Shafi'i took his evidence from the companions sleeping until their heads drooped and touched the ground, and then waking up and praying with Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From evidence like that, he drew his conclusion, and others have their evidence. So with those conditions, you do not lose wudu. And another point, that's whatever you're seated on. So you could be seated on the ground, seated on an airplane seat, a car seat. They say even someone who, for example, was seated on a camel, right? As long as you're mumekkan, no problem, right? That's what it's based on, not on the object that you happen to be sitting on, that you're actually seated firmly and that there's no space between your bottom and what you're sitting on, whatever that happens to be. With that, those conditions, ablution is not lost by sleep. Otherwise, ablution is lost by sleep. As for dozing, the school of Muhammad ibn Idris, you do not lose wudu by dozing, and the sign of that is that you hear those speaking around you. But that's whether you're sitting up or lying down. It doesn't matter the position you're in. So with that, we complete the 4 things that nullify ablution in the school of Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. And then there's another question we advise you all to review in Reliance of the Traveler about following other than the school of the imam that you typically follow, the conditions for the permissibility of that. Did anyone have a chance to review those? It's okay if you didn't. I didn't give it as homework. Anyone have a chance to review those? طيب. That is homework for the next class, right? Next Friday or Saturday. And we want to survey because we noticed some students weren't able to attend this week. We want to make sure that we're able to commit to this time, inshallah ta'ala, and people are able to attend. We'll talk about that, inshallah, and Tawji on Sunday. We'll talk about that. La ilaha illallah. So that's homework for next week, to find the conditions for following other than the school of one's imam as listed in Reliance of the Traveler. And specifically, we want you to pay attention to where he says that you have to follow everything that is related to that case. And the reason we want you to review that is because we gave you a dispensation to understand in that question, and that is Ibn Ziyad's position that wudu and salah are separate cases. So that allows us to pray, for example, with wudu that's valid in the view of Imam Malik or Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahumullah, and then continue to pray as-salah according just to the school of Imam al-Shafi'i. That is permissible in Ibn Ziyad's fatwa, right? Rahimahullah. You'll find that in Bugyatul Mustarshideen for those of you that are able to read Arabic and like to read in Fatawa. The Fatawa of Habib Abdul Rahman Mashhur, it's there. On the net, you might find it in some of the Fatawa of Sheikh Amjad Rashid, who's used to answer questions in the Sunni Path, and Qibla.com later on. You'll find that in some of his online Fatawa too. I don't know if those are still present on the net and in what medium they're being shared, but you'll find that there. And then what you're looking up is the opposite. That's Ibn Hajar's position. It's a quote of Ibn Hajar. Yes. Wa alaikum salam. I don't recall. That's your homework to find it, inshallah. You'll dig it up. I'll tell you that in the early part of the book, there are sections about following qualified scholarship, and also in the appendices, like the last W's, you might find that. And he's very, very well indexed. That book is extremely well indexed. So I'm sure you'll be able to locate it in the table of contents. Inshallah. And with that, alhamdulillah, we are moving on past breakers of wudu, but we want to add sunnahs of wudu. Can one of you boys take this? Pass some to the ladies and then let them be passed around among the men. Bismillah. Start by passing your brother one. Bismillah. So we're going to read this because at this level, we definitely should be covering sunnahs of wudu. And some of you have already read Mukhtasar. At least one of you has already read Mukhtasar, and that has sunnahs. So we definitely don't want to be going backwards, inshallah ta'ala. So we want to cover these sunnahs of wudu, and this is from Al-Habib Abdullah, Sheikh Abdullah bin Abdul-Rahman Bafadl's Mukhtasar Latif. He has two abridgments in fiqh. He has a Mukhtasar al-Kabir, also known as Al-Muqaddim al-Hadramiyah, and he has Al-Mukhtasar al-Latif, his lesser abridgment. And that is what some of you have read. And many are familiar with Al-Muqaddim al-Hadramiyah because it's a very well-known, excellent Mukhtasar in Shafi'i fiqh. So we're going to go through some of these sunnahs, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, understand that the sunnahs of wudu are many. Sunnahs of wudu are many. And from them are these. And so first of all, the term sunnah. The term sunnah in law has synonyms, right? It has other terms that mean the same thing, right? Synonyms, two words that mean the same thing. So from the words that mean sunnah are as-sunnah, wat-tatawwu', wan-nafal, wal-mandub, wal-hasan, wal-muraghab fi, right? And what's meant by that, or you could say the ruling of that, is ma yuthabu ala fi'lihi wa la yu'aqibu ala tarkihi. It is that which you're rewarded for doing, though not punished for departing from. That's its ruling. So essentially here that means mandub, things that are recommended by the shara. And now that is what's meant here. Other times that we might say sunnah, we mean the aqwal, af'al, and taqrirat of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? The things the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did, or accepted from others, right? That's in the context, right? That's like in the context of hadith and usul. But in the context of like a chapter like this in fiqh, what we mean is it's mandub shar'an, right? It is recommended shar'an. It can be understood by the shara' that you're rewarded for doing it, not punished for departing from it. And in many cases, it'll overlap, right? It'll be an explicit statement of the Prophet ﷺ or action of the Prophet ﷺ. However, you might say some of these are understood as being recommended by qiyas, and that might not have been an action that was witnessed from the Prophet ﷺ in that given context, right? So it wouldn't be technically a sunnah by the meaning of hadith, but it's sunnah in the meaning of furu' fiqh, right? And inshallah, you understand that subtle difference. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Okay, so the sunnahs of wudu are many. First of all, another thing, it's very, very important to pursue and strive for the sunnah. So from the meanings of striving for the sunnah are seeking the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And typically when we perform an act of worship and we strive to perform the sunnah in that action, we are anticipated, we're likely to attain the nur and the barakah of that action. And similarly, if we neglect the sunnah, it's unlikely that we would attain the light and the blessing of that action. And many times, if we are neglectful of the sunnah, we're in danger of falling into makruhat or muharramat with respect to that action, and then we might invalidate the action altogether and lose any benefit. So, for example, and this is out, you know, we could give the example in the context of wudu. It's sunnah to wash the face 3 times. So someone who always washes their face 3 times out of dedication to Allah and love of Allah and His Messenger and dedication to be beloved to Allah by following the Messenger sincerely, it's very unlikely that they're going to ever miss part of their face, right? You washed it 3 times. How would you miss some? But someone who just says, "Oh, it's just sunnah. Let me do the easy wudu." Some people will say Quranic wudu, if that's a meaning, masakin. And just wash your face 1 time. That person, it's relatively easy in a given time when they're rushing, especially our kids like to do that. They like to cut corners. That you'll look at them after, and then like this little space between their ear and their eye is dry still, meaning they didn't even get the whole face, right? Whereas if you wash your face 3 times, being cautious about the sunnah, from the sunnah is to go beyond the bounds of the face. Very unlikely you would ever miss a spot, right? Whereas if you're negligent in the sunnah, very quickly you fall into makruh, right? Some of these sunan are makruh in the Shafi'i view to leave, and they're obligatory to perform in the view of the other imams, right? So one immediately falls into makruh when you miss sunnah. And then also you're in danger of even neglecting the work to the extent that you invalidate the whole work, and then you lose everything in the work. Whereas in the sunnah, when it's anticipated, one will get the light and the blessing of the work. And our performing the sunnah is a sign of our love for Allah. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Right? Say, if you love Allah, then follow me. If you love Allah, then follow me. Right? So when they list signs of the love of Allah, typically one of the first signs, if not the first sign they're going to miss, is al-ittiba'. Then closely following the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If we love Allah, how do we express that? We express it by following the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So our performing sunnahs are a sign of our love for Allah, and Allah giving us tawfiq to perform the sunnah with ikhlas and tawadu' is a sign of Allah's love for us. Allah giving us tawfiq to perform the sunnah with pure intentions and humility, right? That's a sign of Allah's love for us. So it's really important, really important. So you could say from the meanings of sunnah are qurb min Allah, nearness to and love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many sunnahs. These are just a few. So we're going to read through these. Bismillah.
The sunnahs of wudu are siwak, cleaning the teeth.
Allahu Akbar. Siwak. So that is a sunnah. Siwak is a name for cleaning the teeth. Or actually, it's a name for like brushing something and the instrument that is used for that. And in the Sharia, in the sacred law, siwak is defined as delkul asnan wa ma hawa alayha bi shay'in khashan, is to rub the teeth and what is around them, like your gums, the palate, the tongue, with something abrasive. And I got a new siwak for this lesson because my old ones are looking kind of raggedy. So, la ilaha illallah. So, anything abrasive that is pure and not attached to you, unlike your finger. Your finger's attached to you, so there's khilaf there, but technically in the madhab, it does not count as a siwak. But anything abrasive can be used as a siwak. So your toothbrush is a siwak. A rag that is abrasive is a siwak, right? and anything abrasive can be used as a siwak. However, the best siwak is this type of wood, which is in Arabic with hamza, arak, right, ending in kaf. Arak, and there's elongation on the ra. Hamza or aleph on a hamza on a aleph kursi, ra aleph kaf. Arak. It's a type of brush that grows in southern Arabia. These that we use are actually the roots of it, but the stems are good too. And actually, the fuqaha say they're better, but people tend to prefer the roots because they are softer, and you can make them bristly. So the best siwak is arak, this plant that we all call a miswak. A lot of us think this plant is the miswak plant, but it has a name. The Prophet ﷺ used arak. After that, nakhal, palm is a good siwak. After that, zaytun, olive. After that, everything with a good fragrance. And then anything abrasive, and in the meaning of a siwak is an abrasive cloth, right? You could use an abrasive cloth. Naam. And then siwak, sunnah that be held in the right hand. And the way you hold it is like this. Pinky and thumb under it, middle 3 fingers over it. The siwak, it's best that it be dry and moistened with water. And just doing your teeth one time accomplishes the minimum sunnah. And the most complete is 3 times, unless you're doing it because there's been some change in your oral hygiene, right? Like you've eaten food that discolored your teeth or changed the taste or odor of your mouth. Then if it's due to a change, you use it until the change is removed. And it is sunnah to do the upper right, upper left, lower left. So that looks like a figure 8 laid on its side, right? And each one of those is 1. And then also sometimes they'll do circles on the right and then circles on the left. You could do either of those ways. Doing the teeth, it should be back and forth, arban, right? Same thing your dentist will tell you. Not up and down, that pushes your gums back. And with a siwak, it might bloody your gums, right? The fuqaha say across. And then on your tongue lengthwise. And again, it's the teeth and what's around them. The palate is sunnah. The tongue is sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ would do siwak often. Siwak is recommended in every state except after Dhuhr time has entered for someone fasting, and that is the relied upon position of the school of Imam Shafi'i. However, the ikhtiyar position of Imam Nawawi is it is never offensive. It's always recommended, even for someone fasting. That is Imam Nawawi's ikhtiyar. However, Shafi'i's understanding was that after the zawal, which is when Dhuhr time enters for someone's fasting, it is makruh. La ilaha illallah. And then there are times when it is emphasized, like for salah with every takbir, like for wudu, like for dhikr, recitation of the Quran, reading knowledge, before going to sleep, when awakening from sleep, entering one's home after performing witr, and in every state it is recommended. In every state it is recommended. It's one of the last works the Prophet ﷺ did. He did siwak right before he died, and that is one of the times it is recommended as dying. And Ash-Sharbini al-Khatib mentioned more than 70 benefits of the siwak. From them, that it reminds you of the shahada at the time of death. And it comes in athar, and you are familiar with this athar from Bidayat al-Hidayah. Matharatun lil-fam, mardatun lil-rab, masqatatun lil-shaytan. So Now, attached, I mean part of your person. However, there's discussion about whether a garment can be used while you're wearing it or if you're not wearing it, and that's perhaps beyond our scope. Yeah. But by attached, I mean like your attached finger, meaning part of your body connected to your body. Yes. I don't. Do you mean top right, bottom right, top left, bottom left, like a sideways figure eight, like that, and back and forth on the teeth. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. Naam. So a siwak is sunnah. Then khilaf in a school. Is the siwak a sunnah of wudu that precedes it, or a sunnah of wudu that is included within wudu, within the actions of wudu? Those are two positions. Ibn Hajar's position is that it is a sunnah of siwak that falls within the actions of wudu. So he places the siwak after washing the hands and before rinsing the mouth. Imam Ramli places the siwak, and also the author of Al-Muqaddim al-Hadramiyah and Al-Mukhtasar al-Latif, that's how he lists it. He lists it as a sunnah of wudu that precedes wudu. So the siwak is done ahead of everything else associated with wudu. And based upon that khilaf, if we place it as a sunnah that precedes wudu, it requires its own intention. Okay. So one would intend sunnah as-siwak, nawaitu sunnat as-siwak. And then also, if you did siwak for salah, you should intend the sunnah of siwak, right? For every takbir. Naam. Personally speaking, I tend to act on Imam Ramli's position due to a subtlety related to siwak for basmalah. And that's what is in the video that Sayyid al-Habib Omar does, teaching sunnahs, that you all will find on the net. But technically speaking, Ibn Hajar's position is that it be done after the hands. So that is the first of the sunnahs as siwak. And then you can keep going.
Number 2, saying Bismillah.
Yep, keep going.
Washing the hands.
Okay. So saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and that is in Arabic at-tasmiyah or al-basmalah, and washing the hands. So in the larger abridgment, the author of what we're reading here, the author of Muqaddim al-Hadramiyah, he says, then saying Bismillah combined with an intention while along with the beginning of washing hands. So actually saying Bismillah occurs while washing the hands and intending, doing 3 things at once. Like if this were a faucet, I'm sticking my hands under the faucet and washing them, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. With in my heart the intention of, we could say the intention of the sunnahs of wudu, or due to a subtlety that Sayyid al-Habib Omar taught us, you could just intend wudu, or you could intend at-tahara lis-salah, or any obligatory intention at that point, and you're going to intend it again at the face. So previously you have learned that the place of the intention is washing the first portion of the face, right? You learned that maybe in your last lesson with Ustad Ammar, right? However, we also know that innamal a'malu binniyat, that actions are only based on intentions. And as Shafi'i said, that hadith enters 70 chapters of fiqh. So one is rewarded for that when one's actions are valid based on intentions. So there are a number of sunnahs that come ahead of that obligatory intention. So in order to be rewarded for those to count, they require an intention, right? So effectively, we're making intention twice. We're making intention at the beginning of the sunnahs of wudu, which is while saying Bismillah and washing one's hands. And then additionally, we're making the obligatory intention, for example, at tahara lis-salah, while washing the first portion of the face. So be aware of that subtlety. La ilaha illallah. And actually, keeping the intention in your heart from the very beginning of the sunnahs of wudu until the end of the actions of wudu is recommended. Being present, knowing exactly what you're doing the whole time, and intentionally doing it. But in terms of like a specific legally binding, meaning shar'an binding intention, it must be present in the heart at the beginning of the sunnahs, and also present in the heart, an obligatory intention at the first portion of the face that you wash. Right? So one is doing that. Bismillah while beginning to wash the hands with the intention of wudu, or the intention of performing the sunnahs of wudu. And some of the fuqaha are going to say with the intentions of the sunnah of wudu. But a subtlety that I've never found in books, but we found it from Sayyid al-Habib Omar, hafidhahullah, is that some of these things ahead of the face are obligatory with some of the imams. So someone who made an obligatory intention, inshallah ta'ala, is rewarded for those as obligations, if we say that they're obligations. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. All right, Bismillah, washing the hands. The hands are up to al-ku'ain, up to these pronounced bones on the thumb side of the wrist. Okay, you're washing your hands 3 times up to that point. If you've been asleep and you're not certain of the purity of your hands, or generally speaking, if you're not certain of the purity of your hands, to touch something moist or a small quantity of water prior to washing your hands 3 times is makruh. So bear that in mind. So one wash one's hands 3 times. La ilaha illallah. You can keep going.
Rinsing the mouth.
You keep going.
Rinsing the nose.
La ilaha illallah. So rinsing the mouth and rinsing the nose. And actually, before we do that, I want to go back to one point on the Bismillah. The most complete formula of Bismillah is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, but the minimum is Bismillah. If you forget at the beginning, you do it throughout at any point. So if you remembered, you forgot to say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, you do it at the point that you remembered. Just like if you are eating and you forgot in the beginning, you say Bismillah when you remember, awwalahu wa akhirahu. Or Bismillah fi awwalihi wa akhirihi. Say Bismillah at its beginning or its end, right? So if you forget Bismillah, what do you say? Bismillah at its beginning and at its end. Same thing in wudu, right? So if you forgot it, you say it throughout. Say Bismillah fi awwalihi wa akhirihi, right? Same as eating or drinking and everything that has recurring actions, and a Bismillah is sunnah for it. If you forget and remember, you do it throughout. And then washing the hands that we did. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Thumma madmada wal istinshaq. Okay, the minimum madmada is to put water in your mouth. The minimum istinshaq, the minimum rinsing the nose, is to put water in the nose. So even if you put water in your mouth and drank it, you did madmada. That's the minimum. But the best way is to swish it around your mouth and far back. And doing it extensively is recommended for someone who is not fasting. In that case, it is makruh, right? So like essentially gargling way back in your throat. But that would be makruh for someone fasting. And if water goes down, it will break their fast. And then expel the water, right? That is the most extensive way to do it. Swish it around your mouth, gargle it back, expel it. With the nose, to lift it up with one's breath and to expel it. That is the best way to do it. But as long as you've placed water into your nose, you've done istinshaq. And then I had you read these two together because there are two ways that can be divided into, or you could say there's two types of rinsing the mouth and nose that can be divided into 6 different combinations, right? 3 of them where you rinse the mouth and nose from the same handful of water, and 3 of them where you rinse the mouth and nose with separate handfuls of water. And the best of those 6 ways, and there is a strong hadith narrated by Sayyidina Ali, is to take a handful of water. Rinse your mouth with that handful of water and rinse your nose with the same handful of water, and then to do that 3 times. Okay, and notice the mouth must precede the nose. Okay, the order is necessary there. It's mustahaq, as it's said in Arabic, right? So the best way is a handful, rinse the mouth, rinse the nose, second handful, rinse the mouth, rinse the nose, third handful, rinse the mouth, rinse the nose. And if you look in some of the longer books, like the Hashia of al-Bajuri on the Shara of Ibn Qasim, Al-Ghazi of Matan Abi Shuja', you'll find all 6 of those listed out. I never bothered teaching them all, but that's a reference if somebody wants to list them. But the way we've explained, that is the best of those 6 ways. However, kids or new Muslims that maybe not that coordinated yet with ablution, from experience, you might find it's easier just to teach them rinse their mouth 3 times, then rinse their nose 3 times separately. Combining the 2 is a lot going on. And for someone who's new at it, it may be difficult. So many of us might have learned, rinse your mouth 3 times with a new handful of water each time, then rinse your nose 3 times with a new handful of water each time. That is one of the ways, and that is probably the easiest and most simple way, especially for someone who's just learning and not that coordinated yet in doing it. So bear that in mind. La ilaha illallah. So that's rinsing the mouth and rinsing the nose. Naam, you could go, keep going.
Beginning with the right, doing everything 3 times.
Naam, beginning with the right. Sayyidatuna Aisha said the Prophet ﷺ loved tayammun, doing things from the right in his tahara and in his affair, right? So some things can be done right side first, then left, like washing the arms and washing the feet. However, the 2 cheeks, there's no right and left. The 2 sides of the head, when wiping the head, there's no right and left, right? So not all of the actions lend themselves to doing right side first, then left. Unless someone had one hand, they would wash the right side of their face first, then the left. But otherwise, it's effectively in the arms and the legs, right? And then doing everything 3 times. So to do it less than 3 or more than 3 with certainty is makruh, right? But if you forget, you should assume you did the lower number and do up until you're certain that you've done 3 times. But from someone else's water, you definitely shouldn't do more than 3 times knowingly. That's offensive, and it's forbidden to waste someone else's water or water that belongs to the public. So doing everything 3 times. Everything 3 times means even the head 3 times in the relied upon position of the Shafi'i school, even the ears 3 times, even the dhikrs 3 times. That's in every wash, wipe, and takhleel, and even dhikrs. 3 times mean 3 times, everything. And many of us probably learned wipe the head once, and there are riwayat and hadith that would indicate that. However, there's also a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ made wudu, and the rawi said thalatha, and he said, this is my wudu and the wudu of the prophets before me. So the Shafi'i school took that literally. And also you find a Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he tends towards ihtiyat and ibadah, right? He tends to be cautious and pretty tough, pretty strict about chapters of worship. La ilaha illallah. So 3 times, and that is in every wash, every wipe, and every takhleel, right? Like going between your fingers, toes, combing through your beard, and even the adhkar 3 times. right? So you might make wudu, washing your hands, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Technically, with fuqaha, that's what would be recommended. La ilaha illallah. You can keep going.
Wiping the whole head.
Wiping the whole head with new water each time. And they mentioned that, let's say I was not wearing headgear. I wet my hands, put my thumbs on my temples, and go back to front to back. And if your hair turns over and is not real long, sunnah to go back to front again. That is one time. It is also sunnah while wiping the head to wipe the ears along with the wiping of the head. And that's independent of the wiping of the ears, right? La ilaha illallah. And we'll talk about the ears in a minute. So that is wiping the head. Now, if I have headgear that I don't want to remove, as you all have learned, wiping part of the hair of the head within the boundaries of the head or part of the head is sufficient. So I could technically go like this. That would be sufficient of wudu, right? Because it's part of my head, my hair within my boundaries of my head. I could go like that. But someone who wanted to wipe the whole head and not remove their headgear, I could go like wipe this and connect to it and wipe over my headgear. And that would be recommended. That would be recommended. Naam. Faddal.
Wiping the ears.
Wiping the ears 3 times with new water each time. And the main way that you wipe your ears is with the index fingers and the thumbs. The index fingers in the ear canals and the thumbs behind the ears. So, and also you go wipe along the grooves of the ears with the index finger. And behind the ears, which is actually the dhahr of the ear, it's considered exterior of the ear, batan wa dhahiran, with water, new water each time. That's one. So it's sunnah to do that 3 times, right? Then there's 2 other ways to wipe the ears. With the palms like this. And that could be done conceivably 3 times. And also, like Ibn Naqib al-Masri mentioned in Reliance of the Traveler, it's not in all the books, but it's in some of the books, 3 times with the pinkies in the ear canal. So that is how many? 9. That is 9 times. Conceivably, you could wipe the ears 9 times. I watched our teacher, Al-Habib Omar, will do once. He did the main one 3 times, and then the other 2 just once. And then La ilaha illallah. We also said wiping the ears, faddal. We said wiping the ears with the head 3 times, sunnah. It's recommended, meaning recommended. And when we're coming to the next sunnah, number 10, extending the light of the face and arms, washing beyond the obligatory on the face and arms. It's sunnah that you wash while washing the face all the way out to the ears. So that was 3 times with the face, 3 times with the head, and then up to 9 times while you're wiping the ears. Conceivably, you could wash or wipe the ears 15 times if you did all of those sunnahs. And practically speaking, one might not do all of that all the time, but just understand that that's present. So you could read the next 2.
Extending the light of the face and arms, washing beyond the obligation on face and arms, and the prayers and dua after wudu.
Great. Okay, extending the light of the face and the arms in Arabic, that is italatul ghurra wa tahjil. So that word ghurra and tahjil, that was a word in Arabic that referred to the white blaze on the face of a horse, and the socks, the white on the tips of their legs. And that's considered attractive in the context of a horse. So the Prophet ﷺ compared his ummah to that. But the asal of that, like the initial portion of that, is the portion beyond the boundary of those places that you're obliged to wash to complete all of them. So the slightest amount beyond the boundary of the face, up the bicep and up above the ankle bone, the slightest amount is obligatory so that you've completed everything that's within the boundaries of the obligatory. Extending beyond what's obligatory. So what this means is extending the light of the face and his arms means washing beyond the obligatory in the face, arms, and feet. This number 10 means washing beyond the obligatory in the face, arms, and feet is actually up the leg, right? The extent in the face is that you wash the forelock, the ears, and the two sides of the neck. So one making a really thorough wudu washes all of that area, right? So they did the obligatory and a whole lot further, right? Extending the radiant light on their face that their Prophet ﷺ will know them by on the day of resurrection. May Allah grant us all to meet him and him know us.
Ameen.
And to drink from his basin, a drink after which we never thirst, inshallah ta'ala. And similarly, on the arms, anything above the obligatory is recommended, and the furthest amount is all the way up to the shoulder. On the legs, anything after the obligatory is recommended, and you could conceivably wash all the way up to the knee, though some of the books will say halfway up the calf, right? So it's washing that additional area is recommended. And the Prophet ﷺ said, you come with radiant faces and extremities from the traces of wudu. So whoever's able to extend that, let him do so. And there's numerous sahih hadith indicating that. And that hadith, which perhaps many of us have heard and love, that the Prophet ﷺ said that he was longing for his brothers, and that his brothers were people that loved him, though they didn't ever meet him. And they said, and the companions in some of the riwayat of that hadith, they said, how will you know them? And he said that, like if someone had a horse with white blazes on their faces and socks among dark horses, would they know their horse? And they said yes. And he said that they'll come like that with bright faces and extremities from the effects of wudu. And I'm the one that precedes them to the hawd, to the watering place. So that's a sign between us and the Prophet ﷺ. And we should extend that and be enthusiastic in wudu. La ilaha illallah traces away darkness, and it's a protection from demons. And then lastly, the prayers after wudu, you have a relatively thorough list of the prayers after wudu in the glorious treasure. And that is to raise your sky and your arms to the sky, raise your face and your arms to the sky. Ashhadu wa la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la wa ashhadu anna sayyidina Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Allahumma jalni min at-tawwabin wa jalni min al-mutatahhirin. Some of the books they add wa jalni min ibadik as-salihin. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu wa la ilaha illa anta. Ashhadu wa la ilaha illa anta. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad. And then also Ayatul Kursi 1 to 3 times. And inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr 1 to 3 times. Those are all dhikrs of wudu. And that first dhikr, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la wa ashhadu anna sayyidina Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that Sahih narrated by Muslim that someone who does wudu and says that, the 8 doors of paradise, the 8 gates of paradise are thrust open, and they can enter through whichever one they want. So it's really negligent not to do that dhikr of wudu. And Imam al-Ghazali, you have an exhaustive compilation of dhikrs of wudu in the beginning of Guidance. And he mentions the great reward of someone who performs those dhikrs of wudu. And also in your glorious treasure, in the versions that have a footnote, there are footnotes about the reward of those dhikrs of wudu. And it's immense reward. So we should really be dedicated in that, inshallah. And we have a few more minutes, right? We have a few more minutes, inshallah. So we want to read some new material in addition to this additional material of these sunnahs. Yes.
There was a question regarding miswak, and if you, I guess, swallow a splinter with or if it invalidates the test.
Swallowing it knowingly, and when you're able to do otherwise, invalidates the fast. Yeah. La ilaha illallah. You can read this section.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعليه وصحبه وسلم أجمعين ورضي الله عنكم. Cleansing oneself from everything wet that exits the two waste passages except sperm is required. Cleansing is performed by washing
I think
with
we're going to stop there because we'll go through this whole section, but we'll give a sharh of the ta'rif and then we'll review the whole section. Okay, so this section is on istinja. This section is on al-istinja. And istinja actually means in Arabic, lughatan al-qata. It's to sever something from something. But here it is, shar'an, al-istinja, izalatul kharij al-najis al-mulawith min al-farji an al-farji bima'in aw hajar. So istinja is removal of an impure, moist excretion from the private area that exited from the private area, removing it from the private area with water or stones. Okay, so istinja effectively is removing, cleaning ourselves from excretions with water, purifying water, or stones. But what's meant by stone is kulli jamadin tahirin khali' lin najasa ghair muhtaram. Right? A stone is everything that is dry, pure, or every pure solid that's abrasive enough to remove impurities and not revered, right? So those are four criteria for stones, and we're going to come back over this. We're going over it. We're going to come back over it. So don't worry. And it would be helpful to read this section in Reliance of the Traveler as part of your preparation for the next lesson. So basically something with that meaning. It's solid, it's pure, it is abrasive enough to remove impurities after relieving yourself, and it is not revered. That is what is meant by stone. So essentially what we're saying, or what he's saying, is that istinja must be done with either pure water or stones, or a dry object that has those criteria. Now, if you're going to only do one, it is better to do water. But it is actually recommended to combine water and stones, and then you do the stones first or the dry object first, and then water afterwards. So it's better to combine them. And then these extensive conditions that they mention are conditions for someone that's doing dry istinja without water. If one of these conditions is not fulfilled, they have to use water. Okay, so these conditions he's going to list, these are conditions for dry istinja. And if these conditions are not fulfilled, water must be used. And when I first returned home after my studies, even at like some of the big Islamic banquets and stuff like that, I was really kind of surprised and off-put to how many people were going in and out of stalls at like these rented banquet halls that didn't have anything to do istinja. And it was just unusual, and there's no water there. So anybody that's ever going to do that, you have to understand these conditions, right? And these conditions are not that easy to fulfill, right? So bear that in mind, that water is much easier, and it is more, it's a stronger purifying element. And actually combining water with the dry substance is what's recommended. So like when we would read these chapters, Sayyid al-Habib Omar would always say, like, a seeker of knowledge should use both, right? They really shouldn't limit themselves with just water. Even though water alone is better, they should combine both of them. And we will go through these conditions in what follows. inshallah ta'ala. And you'll also find them in Maqasid of Al-Imam An-Nawawi. You'll find them in Reliance of the Traveler. And you'll see that if you really know those conditions, it's probably going to be easier to just be in the habit of keeping water around, right? And it's not difficult. It's not difficult. Keep yourself an empty water bottle on the door of your car. Ladies, it's easy. They always have a purse, right? So it's easy to have that. But it is a dispensation to not use both. And in the verse of the Quran where Allah praised that mosque that was established on taqwa from the first day, Allah says, "Fihi rijalun yuhibbuna an yatatahharu wallahu yuhibbul mutahharin." In that mosque are men that love to purify themselves, and Allah loves those who extensively purify themselves. Part of the tafsir of that is that the people of the Masjid of Quba, they would combine water and hajar in istinja, right? And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised that. And outward purity and hygiene connects to our purification from sin and our purity of heart. And Allah loves those who purify themselves. So it behooves us to be really, really hygienic and very good at tahara. And that will help our hearts and help us avoid what's foul of actions and words and other things. And may Allah grant us that. And we're going to do these istighfar right quick, and then we can do the adhan. And we got to look at the time too, but we'll talk about that, especially on Sunday, inshallah ta'ala. When we first set this dars, the prayer times were different. Astaghfirullah the mu'minina wa mu'minat, astaghfirullah the mu'minina wa mu'minat, astaghfirullah the mu'minina wa mu'minat, astaghfirullah the mu'minina wa